Chris, welcome to the Live and Learn Video Arts podcast. Thank you very much for coming on. Didn't take too much persuading, did it?
No, not too much persuading.
And do you want to introduce yourself for people who haven't come across you before, who you work for, your job title and things like that?
Yeah, so I work for Octopus Energy, part of the Octopus Energy group, and within that, the electric vehicles business unit. And I'm the learning and development manager there. So I deal with training, onboarding, leadership skills, things like that.
And how long have you been in L&D for?
Officially and unofficially. I feel like most people kind of fall into L&D.
You got to say more about that. Officially, unofficially.
Yeah, well, I guess, no one's, grows up and they're 12 years old and they're like, I want to be an L&D manager when I grow up. Oh, and not no one that I've met anyway. But officially probably for the last 4 or 5 years. But unofficially, I feel like a lot of my roles that I've been in have kind of had an L&D component to it, whether I guess like officially or unofficially, whether it be kind of like training up drivers. I used to work in restaurant delivery, so training up the drivers, training up the dispatchers, and doing things like that. But that was more of an operational role. But at the same time, include those L&D aspects, and then kind of slowly, I guess my career path has kind of gone towards. I think actually my end goal in the for later down the line is to become a teacher, and I feel like sometimes subtly your life choices can kind of direct you down that kind of end path. And so never actually, to be fair, the first time that I heard what L&D was, I was offered a promotion. They said, "Oh, do you want to be L&D manager?" I was like, "What's that?" But we found out eventually.
And you're still doing it, so
we're still here today. Yeah, it was worth it. Yeah.
And do you not regret the choice because you're sat with on the sofa next to me? So
yeah, look, there's better environments to land yourself in. But that's right. There's free lunch, so that's what can I say?
And I guess what do you enjoy about L&D? Because I guess also in the last 5 years, a lot's changed, hasn't it? With pandemic and so on, when you probably first started.
Yeah, I think what I love about it is, I guess, like to be able to like give those. Like light bulb moments for people. And sometimes I think a lot of people kind of know the answers intrinsically, but they need, I guess, to have it heard in like another way, where it actually like resonates with them and it becomes a bit more tangible. And also I think I love the fact that I can have influence on L&D in the sense that a lot of my passion comes towards hating bad L&D. And so I really enjoy being able to like do things that are like a bit more outside of the box, being a bit more creative, and showing people like, yep, compliance training doesn't always have to suck. But yeah, I guess pushing the buck towards like a universe where people actually enjoy the training that they do, because it's possible, but obviously it does take a bit of intention and a bit of effort as well.
Yes, and I think the thing we were going to talk about today was presenting with impact, which is something you've very well versed on, aren't you? You've got a good background on this. You've got a slide deck presentation. It's on LinkedIn if anyone wants to have a look at it.
How did you know that I was the Year 7 speech champion?
I do my research. I've got Alice somewhere in the background.
2008 was a good year for me. Yeah,
wasn't a good year for me, probably not. But it's something I think it's really important in the workplace. Presenting can be something people are scared of doing, nervous, apprehensive. It's not always formal training on it either. But you've got a really nice strap plan, how you describe it, haven't you?
Yeah, so I think I do talks every now and then, and it's called "Nobody Wants to Read Your Slide Deck."
Love it.
And I feel like that's the trap that a lot of people fall into, where that's kind of like you're told to do a presentation or to show an idea, and you go straight to the slide deck and you think, okay, and that's kind of the starting point.
Yep.
And my tagline isn't slide decks are horrible. It's more so you need to start somewhere else. You need to start with the user, with the message, anywhere but kind of like that medium, because then it kind of becomes a crutch. And like we've all sat through really boring presentations where there's a slide deck full of information, but if you're reading that, you're not listening to the presenter.
Yep.
And if you're listening to the presenter, you're not reading the slide deck. So what's the point in even having it as robust in the first place when you could start with, okay, how do I capture their attention? How do I make this as clear as possible? And that's what I enjoy. Like, I guess like everyone knows intrinsically what like a bad presentation looks like, and everyone's experienced those 100%. Things, but it's about thinking, okay, like what would I want to see? How do I want to be presented to? And then kind of working backwards from there.
Do you think presentation skills is covered enough in the workplace or L&D, or is something that people try and avoid, or this stand has been accepted, like you said, about let's just put some slide deck together, accept that it might be a bit dull and kind of get out the way almost?
Yeah, I think people are like a little bit, I guess, like comfortably numb in terms of like bad presenting, and they can just take that for granted. And I think it does a huge disservice to like really good ideas, really good things that, or information that people are trying to get across, when if they can't communicate it in a way that's convincing, in a way that's clear, but people are kind of just used to it, and people don't really say often. It has to be really bad for people to say it was a good presentation, but it doesn't have to be that good for people to be like, that was a good presentation. Just like a few key tenets that you need to kind of abide by, and then like you're away laughing.
Have you got a memory of your first presentation? Because that's L&D, you do it a lot, I'm guessing. It kind of becomes a habit. Can you remember your first big presentation you did, how you felt, any tips or mistakes you made or anything like that?
Oh.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Like in a professional setting, we're not going back to my year 7 speech competition.
Whatever you like, but no,
yeah.
we'll go professional.
In a professional setting, so I didn't nail it, to be honest with you. But essentially, I was just told to pitch an idea. It was maybe some like marketing idea, some way to attract drivers in my restaurant delivery company.
Nice.
And what happened was I took it too casually, and I thought a bit too much about myself and about what I wanted, rather than like I guess like what the business wanted or what the audience wanted. So I was presenting to the like 3 founders at the time, and going through exactly like what I wanted and why I wanted it, but I guess forgot the core message of this is why you want this as well.
Yep.
And this is like kind of getting them on side, which was like a big learning like opportunity for me when they were like, but why do we care about this? And I was like, oh yeah, like this makes my life easier, or I want to do this, but I haven't really shown how this affects you or why you should care.
We covered earlier some kind of top tips to present with impact. What's the first one that comes to mind for you with presenting with impact? If we've got 3 or 4 tips for people listening in who maybe want to present for the first time or want to just kind of polish up some skills, where to start?
I think one, ask if it needs to be a presentation first.
This one.
That's where you should start.
That's a really good. I love that.
Yeah, because again, like the format of what you're presenting, like if it could be a well-formatted PDF, give someone a well-formatted PDF. But if they need to see you, and if you're there just kind of talking at people with like really long verbose slides, like how are you optimizing for the presentation? So presentation, you should think you need to present in a way that optimizing is for like what you're trying to do. Like you're trying to connect with them, you're trying to tell stories, whatever it might be, but you're taking their valuable time. And if they could skim a PDF and get all the information that they need,
an email, couldn't it?
Give them that. Yeah, if it could have been an email, and also that's better for you, because if you don't want to present something that's a bit dull or like a little bit transactional, like you shouldn't have to. You could give it to them in the way that suits them best. Like was it last year, we had a quarter launch for like our growth team, and every kind of quarter it kind of goes through the same motion of kind of the heads of talking about, I guess, like the priorities for the upcoming quarter, what they want to happen, what's happened previously, and like 9 times out of 10, like it is great, but also there can sometimes, when it's quarter after quarter, it does kind of feel like okay, we heard that last time, like what's happening this time. And so we would kind of give them with the task of, okay, like how do we get this done better, where people come out of this quarter launch in a way that involves them and makes them actually understand like what we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve it, but isn't dull, isn't boring. People aren't checking their watches every 5 minutes to see when the bar opens, kind of thing. And so we came up with an idea of like a hackathon, where essentially each head of came with like a problem statement or something they're trying to achieve or something they want to know or do. And then we split the team, the growth team of 100 people, up into kind of 10 smaller teams, and gave them one of these or 2 of these problem statements. And the important part was that they weren't from the department that the problem statement came from. And so they were solving for other people's problems, because I guess we all have that in our job. We're like, oh, like why does marketing do it that way, or why is sales doing it that way? I've got the best idea. We should do it like that. And this gave them that opportunity to do it in a constructive way. So say, hey, here's our problem statement. We want to increase our conversion rate, whatever it might be.
Yep.
And then you've got people who aren't in that department coming together and trying to problem solve for them. And because I guess like heads of don't have necessarily like a monopoly on the good ideas or the best way forward. And especially like when you're an expert, you can feel like a little bit, I guess, like restricted or confined in being an expert, being like, oh God, like, you may be less creative in like your approach.
Definitely.
But when we kind of democratized it to everyone, people came out of that day with, they understand exactly what the priorities were, they felt involved in the process, and they probably came out with more than if they'd just been told, hey, here's the priorities and here's what we're going to be trying to do. Although I will caveat that with it ended with people doing an elevator pitch for like, hey, this is our idea, this is what we propose, and it was going like super well. Awesome ideas were kind of flowing left, right, and center. But about halfway through, my manager comes up to me, who was the head of sales at the time, and says, hey, Chris, like there's some amazing ideas coming out of this. Just wondering, how are we recording all of these? And I was like,
that's another top tip then.
All right.
It makes you going to record something.
Yeah, again, have someone taking notes. But luckily, we had some great people in the background who had taken upon themselves to take notes and get the ideas from people after the fact. But one of those things that, if you're going to do a brainstorming idea and it's going to be presented, try and figure out a way to make sure that it is recorded.
And was the feedback really, really good?
And the feedback was great.
From the previous quarter.
Yeah, definitely. People were saying, like, especially I think everyone feels that they want to have a voice, and we want to be like an innovative company. And like we can get people's message across just in a different way by just involving people in the process and trying to do things like a little bit differently. And people loved it, absolutely.
So in terms of your approach, it has to be presentation. Let's pretend hypothetically here. It can't be an email, so it needs to be presentation. We talk about getting kind of other stakeholders involved. What are the top tips have you kind of got once you've defined
I need to do a presentation? Yes. I think it revolves around starting with the user. Okay, like what do you want them to, there's a good expression, what do you want them to know, to feel, and to do after? And it's like, okay, what do you want them to know? How do you want them to feel about them and about it? And what do you want them to do afterwards as a result? So if you look at that, that can kind of give you a nice like foundation. And then just you got to think about, I guess, making sure that you understand like the three things that you want them to take away as well. I think quite often people get very excited about wanting people to know every single aspect or every single thing.
Stat or
and at the end of the day, like if they're going to take away three things, what are those three things that you want them to take away from what you're saying? Because I feel like sometimes you can get a little bit lost in the weeds, and like you're super passionate about something, that's awesome, but it's very likely that then I maybe are not quite as passionate about it as well. So it's about thinking, how do we engage them? What do we want them to know? And just like condensing it down and simplifying it as much as possible. What I'd also note on that as well is like trying to like create an experience around it that your message deserves. I think if you put, I guess, like low energy or low intention into what you're creating, you're getting that back. Like the easy thing for you to do is to whip up a slide deck, write long bullet points of exactly verbatim, exactly what you're going to be saying and how you're going to be saying it. Chuck in a couple of pictures in there and you're away laughing. That's the easy thing for you to do.
I'm laughing because that's probably what I've done. A lot of people do.
100%. and that's the easy thing. But what you've got to appreciate is that the easy thing for them to do is to pay half attention, to be on their phone, to be checking emails, checking Slack, whatever. That's the easy thing for them to do. So like people's attention is finite, and what you want to be doing, I guess, is interrupting that pattern of their thinking and being like, oh, I want to listen to this, because you've communicated why they want to listen to this. Why is it important to them? Why should they care?
And we've also probably got some viewers who say that's kind of easy because you're very personable. How can we bottle some of that, some top tips? So not using slide deck, researching your kind of end user. How do you kind of get those influencing skills or have the confidence or maybe, the ability to kind of people to warm to you? Is that something you've kind of worked on or something you've kind of practiced or something that you've always kind of had a bit of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that you're constantly testing and learning and adjusting. I think an important thing is to get feedback. I don't think I can say anything convincing enough in the next 10 minutes that will make you go, oh, I can be a good presenter now, or I can present with influence now. But one, it's practice, and so doing it as much as possible, and then getting feedback from people as well. And trying to find people who are going to be honest to you about hey, I like that, or I didn't do that. And also I think you'll know as well, if you're doing a presentation, trying to teach people a process or get people to do something and they're not doing it, okay, maybe your presentation didn't go that well. Or maybe it was a good presentation, but it wasn't, you weren't firm enough in it, or you weren't, you can probably analyze afterwards, okay, what is it that didn't get the behavior that I wanted from them?
And I think storytelling is a really big thing with this, isn't it? So it's a big buzzword.
How did I miss storytelling? Anyone who knows me well enough would be like, storytelling is going to be the first thing that Chris mentions.
You were saving it for a chunky part of the podcast.
This is the crescendo.
I love that. Excellent. It's a big thing, L&D. It's a really important skill, especially with AI coming as well. And storytelling, how to get it right. What would your kind of advice be on that? How to build a narrative? maybe some just quick tips on length or keywords or actions you do to kind of build that story. So if we're not going to have a crutch of, as you said, I was laughing along some kind of images or a really lazy slide deck, building that storytelling, how do you kind of do that?
Well, I think quite often you'll have all of the components of a story, like no matter what you're presenting, and it's about just like trying to figure out, okay, like here are the key elements and the key moments. And I think you always kind of want to end on some sort of high or some sort of crescendo as well. The thing is, I think you don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need to over-engineer a story. And we've grown up with stories our entire lives, whether it be Goldilocks, whether it be Hansel and Gretel, whatever it is, they're not complicated stories. And it's about just figuring out a way to make what you're doing make sense. For instance, there's been times when people have said, hey, like I want to revamp my my presentation. I've got like all this information that I want people to get across, which is like a customer journey or a customer flow. And I was like, well, why don't you just take it from the perspective of a customer and personify them? Hey, this is George. George is 36, lives in Peckham, and like he's going through this journey, and it's all these steps you need, and that's how you can add like a little bit of
detail.
Yeah, you can add like a little bit of character to it. You can add a little bit of humor to it, and it makes it easier than you just kind of presenting like little individual components, because people are going to remember story a lot easier. It's like, oh, George went here and he did that. Okay, rather than what are the things that I need to remember that kind of sit in the ether.
And do you often use humour? Obviously, with video arts, we use humour a lot, but is that something that kind of gets engagement or is a really good tool to use as well?
It's definitely a good lubricant. I'll cut that. So I think it's important, but I would see it as like an ingredient you can use, but you can also not use. But if you're not using it, what ingredient are you putting in there? Like, what are you pulling on? So I guess when you want people to remember something, you want to elicit, say, like an emotive response. That emotive response can be humor, and that's like a very good one. It's an easy one for some people, but for some people it's not easy, or sometimes the content just doesn't lend itself to humor. But you can lean on fear, you can lean on excitement, you can lean on impact, whatever it might be. So like humor, super important, and like that's one that I try and lean on because it makes things a bit more interesting for me. But also you can leverage fear as well. You can, what are people scared of? And it goes back to the storytelling. Like what's the villain in the story, or what's the thing that you were afraid of happening, and what are we trying to avoid? So you can use that. But yeah, like humor's super, super powerful.
And have you got a kind of top tip on a typical presentation length if you're given like an open-ended, for the most impact? Is there some stats you've probably done some research on, or certain length depending what you'd recommend that people have got their attention span on?
As short as humanly possible.
Okay, good.
I would say you never want to take more time than you need. So if you can condense down exactly what you want to say, and you start with those bare bones, which might be like 3 bullet points, and then you just flesh out those 3 bullet points as much as needed, but no more. Like for instance, are you familiar with the Gettysburg Address?
I did a history degree, so I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm very, very familiar.
Absolutely brilliant. And lots of people have like an awareness of it and what it is, and that it was such an impactful speech that Abraham Lincoln did back in the day. But if I were to tell you that it was 272 words, like you might be a little bit surprised if you didn't have a history degree, obviously. And so that's what I try and tell people is a sense that like if he can inspire a nation in strife during a civil war in 272 words, you probably don't need to block out an hour for whatever you're talking about.
So compliance training with
exactly. Like if you can get the emotive response that you need and the information across that you need in the shortest amount of time, people are going to be so happy about that. Like I love the on Google, you can like set meetings to like speedy meetings, so it doesn't actually take the full half hour. It defaults to like 25 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it might be, because I feel like sometimes we will like it's 30 minutes is such an arbitrary number of like how long a meeting should be, or an hour. It doesn't need to be
because you feel like it should be, or that's 100%. What you're expecting, or
100%. But if you like just put a little bit of pressure on, okay, instead of an hour meeting, I'm going to put in 50 minutes. Like usually there's like 10 minutes that can be cut anyway, or like you just need to be more efficient. Maybe don't ask them how their day was at the start of the meeting, whatever it might be. Don't do that. That's a little bit mean. But you know what I'm saying in the sense that people I think hold themselves to arbitrary timelines. We're like, okay, this has to be a half-hour meeting. Does it? Or could it be 25? Could it be 20? Just figure out how short of a time that you can give them, because again, every minute that you take that isn't powerful, that might be something they remember that you don't want them to remember, or isn't as powerful as like one of your core messages that is in there.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of got a really nice narrative now in terms of how to get some impact. You're looking at the end user, format, kind of research, length as well. How important is body language? Obviously, I've seen lots of studies about people only take in what percentage of you actually say. A lot of it's kind of what you're giving off your body language. Have you found that's quite important as well, or that's kind of, along with storytelling, quite a big piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that comes with like a lot of practice. Like it's you can't just like, do a module on on public speaking and then be like, sweet, I'm a good public speaker now. It takes practice, and I think the body language comes naturally as you like practice it more, in the sense that like when you're having a conversation with someone, like you're probably using all of like the appropriate body language.
Don't think about it. Yeah.
And that's because like you're comfortable, you're talking, you're chatting, what you're talking about.
Yep.
And I think that body language, that natural body language, comes alongside when you know your content. And so that's why, like, if you're reading off a slide, you're not giving off any body language.
No.
You're leaning up, probably looking at the screen. So it's about knowing your content. And then the body language comes naturally along with it, at least from my perspective anyway. I don't have any studies to back that up, but that seems to make sense to me, is that if you know what you're talking about and you're not reading off slides, you're looking at people in the eye, engaging with people, that is when it becomes a whole lot easier. But if you're concentrated on reading off the slides verbatim or whatever it might be, you're not going to be concentrating on getting that kind of body language also from other people. Okay, do they look a little bit bored? Do they look a little bit confused? And that helps you be a better presenter as well, because you can read them and think, oh, I might need to up the energy a little bit, or, oh, they look a little bit confused. Maybe I need to slow down a little bit, whatever it might be.
So it comes from confidence, isn't it? And practice, really.
Confidence and practice. And I think, so if you take the audio, if you record a presentation of yourself and you take the audio away from it, people should be able to understand the tone of what you're talking about, whether or not you're trying to be like elicit excitement or fear or humor, whatever it might be. And so try and think, okay, if they can't hear what I'm saying, how do I get that across in the way that I'm using my body?
We always come to the end of the podcast to kind of each episode, a live and learn example where you've kind of lived a mistake or bad presentation, or maybe someone else's. Have you got an anecdote to share with us to kind of finish the episode on?
Yeah,
on presenting skills.
I mean, I don't try out of habit to fail too much.
No one does.
But so we've talked about year 7 speech competition, absolutely nailed it. Year 8, absolute blinder. Year 9 is where I kind of fell off the wagon a bit. I probably got a little bit complacent. And so I'm up there doing a speech. I believe it was about, I got a little bit meta, and I think the brief was do a speech about something that's overlooked. And I tried to get a little bit meta, and I did a whole speech about the nose. And I thought this was funny. I thought it was going to be quite interesting as well. I did like a full just like deep dive into like different noses and different animals and blah, blah, blah. I get about halfway through the speech and people start clapping me off. Now, when you're about 13 years old and people just start clapping, it was kind of like maybe like more so like the bullies of the year. They just start going, just being like, yeah, come on, wrap it up. And that obviously I got their body language, obviously. And it was hugely, I guess, like it dented the ego a lot, because like, oh God, like this is something that I kind of pride myself on. I'm not very good at sports, but what I can do is talk in public. And then I kind of screwed it up, and only until I guess like maybe like recently looking back on it, being like, okay, like, well, what went wrong there? And I think for me, like I didn't take the audience into account. Okay, a bunch of 13-year-old boys probably don't want to lecture on different types of nose and the historical significance of noses,
Why
throughout
not?
time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure now, today, potentially, but back in 2000 and God knows when, it probably wasn't the top of mind. And so I probably didn't take them into account. And I think I was probably like a little bit overconfident, and I don't think I prepared enough for it as well. And I think that goes back down to knowing your stuff and being prepared. I don't believe I was like using, because usually I think I would have memorized it for like year 7 and 8, would have memorized it beat for beat, minute, gesture by gesture. For this one, I think I had a piece of paper in front of me because I hadn't really put the time in, because I thought, oh, like I'm the speech competition guy, I'm going to smash it. And then I was humbled.
Love that. That's a really good thing to end on as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a really good episode. I think lots of good top tips, everybody. Before you go quickly, do you want to tell people how they can find your slide deck presentation on LinkedIn, maybe, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Chris Robinson on LinkedIn, working for Octopus Electric Vehicles. If you know how to search a name on LinkedIn, hopefully you should be able to find it. And obviously, if you want me to come and do a presentation for you on those slide deck presentations, more than happy to help anyone out or give anyone top tips. Just get in touch.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.